Okay, so we'll get started. My name is Mohammed. I lead our product teams at a company called Dessa. We are a company based out of Toronto, just right on King and Spadina. We've been around for about 2.5 to 3 years now. We are primarily focused on building machine learning tools, specifically for high-performance data scientists to be able to scale up their machine learning efforts. This involves tooling to maintain models in production and to be able to rapidly scale the development of our tools. So Dessa, I lead some of our product teams there. We do a lot of work in the machine learning side. You may have heard us from the news and a few other things where we built a lot of research papers around it. But yeah, and
So my name is Henry. I'm the co-founder CTO of SnapTravel, travel chat company based here in Toronto. I started the company about 3.5 years ago. And since then, we've grown to about 60 people in Toronto and another 80, 90 overseas for customer service. We've done over $150 million in sales all over messaging and have over 4 million users all over the world. So it's been a pretty incredible journey over the past 3.5 years, and happy to share my learnings and experience along that journey.
Awesome, thank you. And as for today, I think because we have such a technical audience in the room, what I wanted to really cover is, what's it like running a startup from the seed stage? Talk about a little bit about infrastructure in terms of machine learning, right? What are some of the aspects that we cover in the seed stage and how that differs from the seed stage to a Series A, And the seed stage, you're probably, very scrappy in your development work. You're probably have just yourself and few others working with you. But in a Series A, when you're trying to scale up, you will probably have to worry about scalability and a lot of other things like that, right? So just to begin with, Henry, I know you already mentioned a little bit about SnapTravel, but let's dig into that a little bit deeper and talk about really the technology aspects of it, right? I know the SnapTravel provides a bot platform for you to be able to book hotels, but what about the technology aspects of it? How did you guys get started, really?
Sure. So I'll talk about technology first a little bit and then how we got started. So technology itself, it's a pretty standard modern web architecture. We have it's very microservice based, probably 40, 50 different services, all talking to each other. And we have everything from our data pipeline service to our recommendation service, our NLP service, our chatbot service, as well as our web application itself and external, internal APIs. So everything kind of works together across services to deliver the experience. And the experience for the end user is you talk to our bot on Messenger, SMS, WhatsApp, Alexa. You tell it where you want to go, your preferences, just as if you were to talk to a travel agent. The bot will use NLP to understand what you're saying, understand your preferences, and then give you the best hotel recommendations and best deals all over messaging. That's kind of how the product works, and that's kind of the tech architecture. In terms of how we actually got started, when we started 3.5 years ago, I left my job at Google, and we had no idea what we were doing. So me and my co-founder, we knew we wanted to work together, but we didn't have an idea or a vertical industry. So we're like, hey, we'll figure some things out. We're testing ideas, iterating, pivoting. So that time was very much a rapid iteration process. Like, how do we build a landing page? How do we build an MVP? How do we, get customers validate an idea? Eventually, we ended up in the travel space, and that's when Messenger just released a chatbot SDK, where you can build bots. So we thought, okay, there's something here. Can we bring the traditional travel agent experience back to the sort of online travel world of Expedia and Booking, where everything's depersonalized? That's how we got started. But instead of building anything or any NLP or anything really, we wanted to validate the idea. So it was me on iMessage, where you can message me and I was the bot. So I could look things up for you. You would say I want to go somewhere, and I would kind of go around the web, find things for you, send it to you over messaging. But the crazy part was that people gave us the credit cards over messaging. We're like, wow, there's something here. You trust this service to give your credit card and book stuff. So we knew there's something here. We built the prototype. At first, it was we're using external APIs. So external APIs for our NLP, for the bot, for the state management, and that worked okay well. And then over time, we got better. We got more customers, more data, and we built our own technology in-house. And now all of it is in-house, and we've been outperforming any external provider API since like 2 years ago. So that's kind of how we got started in the journey over time.
That's amazing. Actually, I wanted to dig into that a little bit deeper. You said that you were just like trying out newer ideas and trying to really find product market fit, right?
Right.
Where's the market situated right now, and what can you build to be able to do that? And so you had these scrappy ways for, you are the bot yourself, right? But like in terms of like experimentation, right? What are some of the other strategies that you guys took to be able to really experiment, and did you do any kind of like, did you monitor any kind of KPIs
Right.
for you to be able to tell like, hey, there's actually an opportunity here and I want to be able to dig into this a little bit further?
Right. For starting a company, there's one set of process and metrics, and then for growing and scaling companies, a different set. For starting a company, one of my favorite books for anybody who's interested in this is Running Lean. Not the Lean Startup, but Running Lean by Ash Maurya. He goes into a very specific step-by-step process on how to test an idea, validate an idea, what kind of signals, metrics, and conversion rate, all these things for validating an idea. So we kind of just followed that book, reach out to people. We would send like 50 emails, see how many people opened, how many people replied, how many people like converted, and that whole funnel we would track just to gauge intent and gauge sort of the stickiness of a product or of an idea. And then that's how we got started in the space. And then as we scaled the company, it's a little bit different. Then we turned it more to, at first, user feedback, like talking to our users, seeing what they liked, what didn't like. And once you had enough users, it'd be A/B testing. So testing different products, different flows, different funnels, looking at how different people behave to different placements, different features, different buttons, how to affect their conversion. And then also, once we got the product conversion metrics down, we would look at the acquisition channels. So now it's like we have a great product, how do we bring people to it? So where do we spend our money? How do we spend money? What's our ROAS, return on ad spend? If I spend $1, do I get 80 cents back, $1.20 back, $1.50? And how do the channels scale? And what are the opportunities in the channel? How much do I bid? How much do I pay per impression? And these are all the very metric-driven initiatives we took throughout the stages of the company. So we've been always metrics-driven and data-driven in our company. That's part of core of who we are. Both my co-founder and I studied computer science, and it's one of our core values within the company, especially in a very competitive space like B2C travel, which is probably one of the most competitive spaces out there. So we're very metrics-driven in that sense. And what you measure changes as you scale the company, but it's been metrics-driven from day zero to now day or whatever, 1,000 something.
Right, and that's really interesting, and that's thanks for answering that from like, but that's the metric from like the your business to the consumer side, right? The people who are using the app. But you also have a B2B side of things, right? From the admin side, because you probably have to form relationships with these external hotels, right, and other business models, right? How did you approach those? And when you are a smaller company, now you have like over $100 million in sales, but before that, when you were such a small company, how did you get all these hotels to trust you to be a partner and really get there?
Yeah, so luckily, this is probably not a super satisfying answer, but ultimately, we're selling, we're driving sales for people, and everybody, when you're on the sell side, when you're on the buy side, it's a lot easier. Like I'm not selling something to a company, right? I'm not doing enterprise sales. I'm not going out there trying to sell, the solution to a Core or Marriott. I'm just helping them sell their inventory. They get the sale, and I take a cut. So from that perspective, it was actually quite easy. I always say, everybody needs more distribution, and we're just an extra distribution channel. And we had some good credibility and backing because it was a new channel. It was unique. People liked the hype around that. That helped. That definitely helped. But at the end of the day, it was a buying process, and buying is one of the easiest things you can do. When you have money to spend or buy, people want to sell things to you.
Right. Okay. Cool. Let's dive into the technology part of it a little bit deeper. I know you mentioned at the beginning that at the beginning of the stage, you had the APIs, right, that you were using. And it's probably like an external API for NLP that you were using. And then slowly you transitioned into building a model yourself and really like investing more in the research part of things, right? So why did you make that decision? And also, what were some of the APIs and processes that we're using at the beginning?
Sure. So for our NLP API, we used an external vendor. It was called Evature. It was a travel-specific NLP company that had a NLP for travel agents. We're like, wow, this is great. Did everything we need, and then we were using them for half a year to about I think 8 months. And then one day they're like, yeah, sorry, we got bought by Booking.com, so we got to shut down. We're like, oh, okay, that kind of sucks. But actually, it was a blessing in disguise because it made us really, spend time and energy and effort to build our own models that eventually outperformed theirs, by the way. But that actually was the driving force for us to build our own NLP, and I think that was very much a blessing in disguise.
And you have some background in machine learning as well, because I know you did your master's in Georgia Tech, is it?
Yeah, so while I was doing this, but just a side note, I was doing a master's. By the way, it's a great program. I must say, I just want to, people who don't know, it's the OMSCS program from Georgia Tech. It's a full degree, top 10 school, full degree. It's 100% online, but there's no online distinction. Full degree, $8,000, 10 courses, and top 10 degree. A really great deal, really great program, great people, and for them, it's about encouraging accessible, affordable public education. But by dropping the prices from traditionally $50, $80K to $8,000, they're making education accessible. So for me, I was like, it's a great program, it's a great deal, and SnapTravel, we love getting good deals. So we did it. I did it, and then I did a machine learning major in that program, and I did machine learning before. So I kind of have a background. I'm not an expert, and I wouldn't say I'm a world-class leader,
right,
but I have some background in machine learning.
That's awesome. So, but what was that like? So, they tell you like, hey, today we're going to shut it down. Booking.com is taking us over. You have X amounts of days to migrate over, right? How did you maintain that part of the business? And also, like, how did you start really like getting deep into the model building and finally build something that is production grade?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, these kind of things definitely take time. What we did is we were working with somebody from a colleague of mine, or a classmate friend of mine from Waterloo. He turned out to be a person who just loved languages, like NLP and languages, and he was doing a master's and now is doing his PhD. And he's like, hey, I think we can do something better. We're like, are you sure? Because Evature took them like 7 years to get to where they are today, and even then they're not like amazing. And they're like, oh, we'll figure something out. So we're like, okay. So then we just did something quick and simple, and it was mostly regex actually at the time, but it worked. It worked. We put it through our data and we compared it to Evature, and I was like, yeah, I actually performed pretty well. Sometimes even better. We're like, hey, there's some hope here. So let's keep refining it. Let's keep adding to it. And we're pretty scrappy as a startup. We're both in terms of like time, in terms of resources, even training data. So we thought, okay, let's use this, regex, mostly regex-based model with maybe some, open source models. Let's use that for now to bootstrap, and then we'll use that to collect more data. We'll have the customers help us train our model in a way. It's like if the customer says this is incorrect, we'll take the data and we'll learn it and get the correct data from the customers. So over time, we built the framework, we built the systems around that, we built the data pipeline and architecture around that, and just kind of, piece by piece, we collected more data, improved the models, and now we have a pretty sophisticated model that's obviously not just regex, but we have a pretty sophisticated model that does, it's a multi-part model that does, NER, IR, and intent detection using various different models, and it combines together to create that experience.
It's a fun little sidetrack, but do you know regex is actually Turing complete?
I didn't know that. Oh, okay.
Yeah, so that's one key takeaway, and I think the second key takeaway is also that you really need good friends to be able to run a business and have them as a saving grace when things go wrong. Now, I know that you said that you guys started building your model, but you also published a paper, right? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I guess this kind of goes back to supporting, also working with the friend who's now, he still works with us, but he's also doing a PhD in linguistics. And for them, it's how do we now publish some of our research, because it is quite industry leading, and we're pretty open about sharing. So you can find it online. We just presented at the IEEE AI for Industry conference, where I actually got the best conference paper, which we're pretty proud of. But essentially, it talks about how using NLP AI in industry at scale, right? And I think a lot of people talk about talk about machine learning AI as like interesting projects or interesting academic papers, but to take some of that stuff and apply it in real life at scale, over to millions of customers and hundreds of millions of sales. I think that's what's unique about the way we look at technology. And yeah, so we did that. That's pretty cool, and you can check it out online. We just talk about our models in different layers and different types of models we use and how we use it.
It's actually really interesting because in Toronto right now is like an AI hub, right? We have Jeffrey Hinton, we have UFT, the Vector Institute, and lots of other really interesting things that are happening in the area. But many of us, some of us from Dessa, we actually teach a course in UFT on applied deep learning, because what we found is that people always get stuck in the POC stage of things, right? They will do their research, right? They will go through tons of research and development, and they'll burn through a lot of research scientist efforts, and then they'll have a model, but they will do nothing with it. They just have it somewhere there, right? But putting it into industry, putting into a use case like SnapTravel, putting into many other companies that are doing, for example, there's a company like Root Insurance, there's also companies like Uber who are really using machine learning to drive their business, is really something that still needs to be solved at scale.
Yeah, I think one of the things I learned is ultimately technology has to drive some sort of business value, at least in the startup stage. And this is more about sort of building a company where for the seed round, for the pre-series A, whatever, you can kind of talk about tech and hype and get people excited for a certain point. But at some point, when you're growth and when you're going out for the growth round, technology has to drive that business value, because ultimately that's what technology does. It makes people work faster, work smarter, more efficient, whatever it is. And for us, that's what the approach we've always taken is. Use great technology, use it when it's where it makes sense, and use it to drive business value. Because ultimately, if it doesn't help the customer, it doesn't help the company, it doesn't help us, it's just great project and great paper, but it doesn't actually drive the value that I think good technology should drive.
Yeah, totally. But in terms of like engineering culture, how do you bring that out into your culture? I know just before we sat down here, you mentioned you really build technology just to satisfy the business needs. Nothing more than that, nothing too extra, right? Try to keep it lean, try to keep the technology lean as much lean as possible. But how do you like ingrain that in your culture now that you're scaling your company right now after a Series A? How do you ingrain that in your culture at the moment?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think for us, there's this sort of notion of people want to work on interesting tech problems just for the sake of tech problems. And for us, we really try to align people around this concept of personal growth as well as winning, right? Because there are still very interesting problems. And they've been solved in many, many different ways. And we look at, and for me, engineering is about solving problems, whether you use tech or not use tech. If you can solve something faster without using tech, and it works and it scales, great, right? Why do you need to architect this huge, crazy tech thing that's hard to maintain, hard to reason about? So for me, it's about how do I solve problems, and how do I grow in that process? Because solving problems effectively, I think, is a true measure of a skill, right? To solve something ineffectively and overly complex is actually not, in my opinion, a measure of skill. It's maybe a measure of I want to do something cool or fun. So for me, we try to find people who are aligned with that. We try to ingrain that in our culture. We're very metrics driven in that sense, and we align our company towards our North Star metrics around revenue, growth, retention, stuff like that. And that's not to say we don't use technology and leading edge technology, right? If you look at our paper, some of the models we use are really, really fresh and really brand new, and using it at scale in production. We're doing some really bleeding edge stuff with optimizing pricing and bidding on our hotel side, and how do we price things. And that's very hard, very interesting, but it also drives a lot of business value. So that's kind of what we try to align ourselves on, and I try to make sure that people are always learning and growing in many ways, and that could be infrastructure, it could be architecture, it could be process as well. But so we still have alignment, and we make sure people are growing, and I think that's ultimately what's most important.
Right, and even from my experience, what I've seen is that in startup world, many more companies have actually failed due to over-engineering than due to under-engineering. Because what will happen is they'll get a seed of round, they'll get funding, right, and then they'll spend a lot of time trying to perfect a particular technology instead of experimenting, right? As a startup, the best thing that you have as a startup is agility, right? You're like a small ship that can change course really, really fast, right? But when you over-index on a particular engineering problem or try to perfect something, over-optimize for speed and things like that, I mean, there are situations where you might need to do that, and that might be your cutting-edge development. But a lot of startups have actually failed due to the fact that they over-engineer way too fast in their life cycle, right? Okay, cool. So now what I'll do is I'll divide the next few sections into two different parts. The first part is let's put ourselves in your shoes before the Series A, right? Before when you were just starting out, pre-seed, seed era, right? And then we'll put ourselves in the shoes of after you right now, right? What are you doing right now? But let's talk about engineering before, during the first few parts, right? How many people were in the team? How did you folks, like, what were your engineering practices? How did you put processes in place to be able to really develop and move as fast as possible?
Yeah, so when we first started, it was just me and my co-founder. We would just, I would build things and he would go kind of pitch around. And then we moved back to Toronto in 2016, and we were in the DMZ, about 4 or 5 people. Again, super scrappy, just work on stuff. There's no roadmap. There's no sort of proper sprint process. It's just like, hey, let's go ship something. Like, we have an initial idea of the vision of what we want to build. Let's go ship it, and then we talk to customers and we figure that out. So it was very, very lean and process light, if at all, because everybody, we sat in this pod and we just turn around and talk to people.
Right.
And then as we scaled over time, we had a little bit more process, so we started doing like a light kind of Kanban process, you call it. We used Trello a little bit, maybe the Scrum-wise, different other kind of Scrum-like tool. And then as we grew more and more, we kind of matured as an organization. We had different teams. We had a PM. We had a PM who can help us drive processes. And then we also moved to a more proper sprint process. And we had different teams, so each team had their own sprint process and sprint planning, review, backlog grooming, all that stuff. So yeah, I think it's sort of the organization evolves over time, and it all evolves based on the needs and continuous improvement and feedback. And these are the things that we learn over time. We kind of see what works, what doesn't work, where do we see processes breaking, and do we hire the right people to help us improve that, and we try to change our process to accommodate for that.
Right, but in the beginning stages, when you were doing, you being the CTO, you're probably doing a lot of architecture design yourself, right? How did you make those decisions? Like, how did you know, now is the time to use a pub sub mechanism, for example, or now is the time for us to scale up and optimize our front end to make it faster, or any of those aspects?
Yeah, those are good questions. I mean, the front end is definitely a piece where I think I probably underinvested a little bit. Me being not a traditional front-end person, I think one of the mistakes I made was not investing as much in our front-end, because ultimately we are still a B2C company and front-end matters. We took the very Booking.com approach, which is like just throw a bunch of tests, see what converts, and then whatever converts, you just keep it. And that kind of became, a little bit of a cluster of different colors and logos and stuff like that. So we had to revamp our front end. Took way too long to do, but now we finally finished our revamp of our front end. That's an example of a bad architecture decision, and we probably should have, hired a strong lead from the start to really make sure we use the right design system, the right patterns there. In terms of the back end, I guess I built a startup before this. I was at Google. I worked at a startup. I was there when there were 10 people. The CTO was the ex-CTO of Zynga, so I got a lot of perspective just from other mentors, other people in this industry, also from self-experience, and a lot of just reading as well. So for the back-end stuff, I feel like we've made mostly good decisions. We decided to do microservices pretty early on, and that's mostly helped because we can deploy things faster. Each service can be owned by a team, or each team can own multiple services, and they can be independently monitored, tracked, and all that kind of stuff. So that really helped with our deployment process. And then in terms of the machine learning architecture, we had other people in the company who were really strong at that, so I delegated that to them. They designed the entire workflow pipeline from training, validation, to deployment, to inference, back to training, and all in a cycle. And that, they've handled that really well. Same with our data architecture, with a data guy on the team who drove the process end to end. We made some mistakes on choosing some platforms. We used certain tools that weren't scalable. We had to redo, but overall, delegating the pieces with strong leaders helped a lot, and I fortunately had some experience on the overall architecture and back end of things.
Right, that's awesome. Can we dig into the machine learning part a little bit further? You mentioned that you have a machine learning pipeline, right? What does the pipeline look like right now, and what was the rudimentary pipeline, and how has it evolved so far? Because I know a lot of companies don't actually have a pipeline for machine learning. They build a bunch of models, and then one of them goes into production at some point, right? There's no continuous deployment cycles. There's no way for someone to convert a pickle file into a microservice in an easy way, right? So what does the pipeline look like right now?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think it's still pretty scrappy right now. When we first started, it's just somebody's laptop, bunch of Jupyter notebooks and stuff like that, right? And then over time, we had a little bit more formal process. So we added a data labeling tool called Pivosa, where we have labelers label our data. And then that at first, just gave a CSV. We uploaded to S3, and then we use that. And then we eventually moved that to the data warehouse. So now we ingest that data into Snowflake. So basically everything is logged. So we added a logging infrastructure to log every event and every sort of click and label data. We log that to using our event stream through Kinesis now, FluentD to Snowflake. And then we have our labelers label the data in Snowflake, and then we use the data in Snowflake to train that data. It's still actually in a local desktop because it was pretty expensive doing the cloud with the GPUs. So we just bought like a giant GPU machine, and then we just train it locally. And then we deploy the trained model to S3. And then when we deploy our services, it downloads the model, the pickle file essentially from S3 into our server, and then it runs that file. So it's still pretty scrappy, but it works. It's at least it's version pipeline and stuff, but we try to keep pretty lean on that part.
That's awesome. But it's actually really great that you guys are doing a lot of the training and development within your on-premise, right? Because I'm sure there's issues about data sets that you don't want to put it public, right? And at the same time, GPUs are so expensive these days, right? I think a GPU costs like $2.73 per hour, which is very, very expensive, right? But in terms of, okay, so now you've trained a model, you put it into production, right? Do you do any sort of monitoring on the model itself? Or how do you know when is a good time to retrain the model or recalibrate it? Or how do you even figure out like if there's any your standard deviation is shifting or there's any concept drifts that are happening at the moment?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's something we're not super actively doing right now. So right now it's mostly just a batch process. We sort of we collect the data. So we collect feedback data from customers where sometimes if the model is not confident, it'll ask, is this correct? Yes, no. Is this what you meant? And based on that data, we'll collect feedback. And also we have agents, like customer service agents, that can also train the model. So a lot of times we'll surface suggested replies to our agents who can say, this is relevant, yes, no. And we'll use that data to also inform of our model. But the actual online training, it's not fully online yet. We had some debates internally about this, whether we should make it fully online or not. And we decided that it's okay to just keep a batch. So what we just do now is every couple of weeks or a month, we would get the new fresh data, we pass it to our labeler, join it with our customer feedback data, train the model, calculate our F1 score, and then do the deploy or tweak the model, et cetera.
I see. Okay, yeah. That's cool. Okay, one last question on this, on the pre-seed side of things, right?
Sorry, this stuff is like after Series A.
Oh, this is
this is not pre-seed. Pre-seed was just like Jupyter notebooks and that's it.
Okay.
It's like push to production.
Okay, cool. But from the pre-seed side, you're a CTO, which is in the pre-seed side is about to raise some capital, right? What was one? It could be a podcast, it could be a book, it could be any kind of advice that you had at that time that was really helpful for you.
In what context? Like technical fundraising?
In terms of technical concepts.
Technical concepts. That's a good question. For me, to be honest, I've been mostly focused on the process side of things. I think I used to think about tech and DevOps as a technology thing, but I've learned that a lot of it actually is a process thing, and it's about addressing systemic process improvements as opposed to like just a technology improvement. And that's something I've been really focusing my time on across organization as I learn about or experience building a team, building a great culture, building the right tools and systems. A lot of this comes back to process, and it's not, and it's the people behind the process that really matter, not just technology, because technology comes and goes, and tools come and go, and what's hot today could be cold tomorrow. But having the right people, the right process, the right sort of workflow really helps the team do more, get more done faster, helps the culture be more efficient. So that's some of the stuff I've been focusing on. And so unfortunately it's not a direct answer to your technical question, but it is related because your tech output ultimately depends on your process and the people.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think even as DevOps engineers, we tend to over-index on what technology to use, what CI/CD pipelines to use, but instead, if you don't have any kind of like behavioral change within your organization itself, all of those are really useless, right? Okay, so now let's fast forward a little bit after where you are right now, right? You've raised a series, and now you're trying to scale up the company, right? You probably had to hire a few engineers outside of yourselves, right? So what's the headcount like at SnapTravel at the moment?
Yeah, so it's about 60 people in Toronto, mostly product engineering, and then another 80 overseas for customer service.
Awesome. So After you raised this capital round, why did you decide to stay in Toronto and not go back to, say, California or somewhere else? And why did you decide to hire some of the core engineering talent in your Toronto office itself?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I actually started the company in SF. I was working at Google in California. I quit to start the company, and we were there for about half a year until we found our initial idea, and we moved back to Toronto in mid 2016. And that was kind of due to many reasons. One being my co-founder, his wife is here, his family's here. Also, I grew up mostly in Toronto, and I went to Waterloo as well. So part of it is like family, but also it's just the access to talent. I think Toronto has a lot of great, Canada in general has a lot of great talent, and it's not as competitive as it is in the Bay Area, where one day somebody's raising twice you're raising and offering to pay your engineers twice. I mean, it's still competitive. Don't get me wrong. People try to poach all the time, but it's not like that crazy. So I think it's just access to talent, and also on top of that, there's a level of focus where I think there's always the next unicorn, the next hot thing. Elsewhere, whereas here in Toronto, you can really execute and grow the company. So there's combination of reasons there.
Yeah, I think that's what I found as well. Dessa is also based in Toronto region, and many of the reasons we've hired so many people in the Toronto region is because Toronto's just been so great for the AI community or the machine learning community. There's like thousands of meetups that are going on every single day. There's people writing research papers from Toronto like on a daily basis, right? And we've just had such incredible access to talent, just like a walkable distance from Toronto, to be able to find this talent.
Yeah, and also we actually one of the things is we've hired a lot of people who wanted to come back from the Valley. So one of our engineering managers was a senior engineer at Google. I think over half our team has some sort of experience in the U.S. and that's actually, I think, is good. I think as a young person, it's good to get that experience in the U.S. to be kind of in a place which is hyper competitive and also has a lot of smart people, but also people wanted to come back for family, to settle down, whatever, and we get a lot of talent that way. And that we sort of, for us, we try to build a fast growth Silicon Valley style company within Canada, so we capture a lot of the talent here. I think it's very similar to Terminal and what they're doing as well.
Did you do a lot of the hiring yourself at the beginning?
Yeah, so I did a lot of hiring myself, and then we hired a HR person to help with that, and that's helped tremendously. But yeah, hiring is a sort of a company-wide initiative.
I see. So what were some of the things that you like? Do you have a particular style in your interview process? Like, how did you reach out to people to be able to get them to join SnapTravel at an early stage?
Yeah, I think it's anywhere and everywhere. It's like LinkedIn, AngelList, email, cold reach out, whatever channel works and people reply, you go. And events, in person, whatever. And yeah, hiring is tough. It's always tricky, and that's a constant iteration process. I wouldn't say I've nailed my hiring funnel. I still think we can improve on that, and we're continuously trying to optimize with like different messaging, different reach outs, different follow-up periods, different articles we send. It's a competitive process.
Awesome. How do you think your role has changed now when you have scaled the company a little bit as a CTO versus what it was before the pre-seed stage?
Yeah, so definitely one thing is I code a lot less now. So early days I was coding almost everything. Now I'm sort of coding very little, if at all, during the day, and I do maybe 10% at night when I'm at home. But a big part of my role now is about how do I focus on the process and the people within the company. How do I make sure the leads and team leads are successful? Do they have the right support, the resources, the training? Do I have the right people in place? Should I hire somebody? Should I bring somebody on board? Should I swap teams or something? So a lot of that is around the people process of things. I also do. For me, it's just I like a lot of strategy stuff, so I would get involved in the strategic side of the company. But from a purely tech product side, my day-to-day now is a lot around process, like what do we do, why do we do it, how do we do it, and do we have the right people to do it? So that's been sort of a shift for me.
Cool, awesome. I think I'll ask one last question before we jump into a little bit of Q&A. I know we've been talking for some time now. We'll let the audience ask some questions. But one last question. This is more of a future-facing and also reflecting on the past, right? We've seen chatbots become a really big thing about 3-4 years ago, right? So there was this, peak hype cycle for chatbots at some point, and then after that, it slowly died down. Some business models have come out of it, right? Some have gone successful, some not. But the hype has really been stable, right? But we're seeing a little bit of a pickup again, right? Companies like yours, SnapTravel, there's a lot of other companies that are also coming up right now who are doing different kinds of NLP work for other aspects of different kinds of industries. But why do you think that cycle happened? And also, what does this mean for SnapTravel in the future? And what do you see like conversational AI go at a later time?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think I don't know if people remember when Messenger just launched Chatbot SDK. It was a crazy hype wave, and it kind of crashed. And I think it comes back to what I was saying originally, is that technology ultimately has to create real value. If you look at the history of humanity, technology has always created value. And when you're building on hype, when you play, if you play with the chatbots in early 2016, you'll be like, 80% don't create any value, right? It's like a chatbot that tells you like what's the weather. Well, why don't I just open the weather app? So things like that, where it was around creating hype and novelty for the sake of novelty, and it wasn't around creating value. Whereas we've always been about creating value for the customer. And part of it is convenience, part of it is recommendations, part of it is price, part of it is service. But ultimately, for us as a company, we're very focused on creating value for the customer, and that's ultimately why we've been able to grow and sustain. And the hype wave came and went, but we've been growing consistently, doubling, tripling every year for the past 3 years, because of the focus on the customer. And ultimately, I think that's what matters, and that's what's going to win. And so, in terms of looking forward, I think a lot of companies that survived the crash maybe not crash, but the dip, were the companies that focus on creating value. I think my friend Mike at Ada, right? They're about using technology to empower better customer service, and they're creating real value to automate, customer service agents, save companies money, and create maybe even better chat service experience. Right. So things like that, I think, will emerge. And yes, I believe there's a world where chat is better, but it's not better for everything, and that's where companies have to really pick their battles to make sure they're ultimately creating real value.
Right, yeah, totally. And I totally agree with that. It's the same thing with any kind of like machine learning work, right? Machine learning has really existed for a very long time now, but it's just now with the advent of like cloud computing and advent of like being able to use GPUs remotely, it's just much more accessible that a lot of people can create value out of it, right? And that's where we're seeing a huge rise in the peak right now. Would you say so?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's like, yeah, there's it comes back to creating value, and I think now we're seeing companies take that technology and really automate, scale, and make things do things better, faster, cheaper.